Hello, welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martijn Lofvers. I'm the Chief Trendwatcher of Supply Chain Media. You may also know me as the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement, the quarterly magazine of Europe, but also bi-weekly newsletter and a website and a LinkedIn group. And I'm also the architect of the SCM IT Subway Map, but also the architect of the SCM Consultancy Subway Map. This webinar, this live webinar, we're going to talk about two hot topics, S&OP and resilience. In this live webinar, I have two experts. So, like I show you who are in the webinar. Let me check here. Here we go. So next to me, I have Jeroen Scheepers. He's a partner at Involvation. He has a background working at DHL and another strategy consultant, and later on he moved to Involvation. So Jeroen, welcome.
Thank you, Martijn.
And next to him, we have Alfons Willemsen. He also partnered at Involvation, and he has been working for Involvation quite a while. But before that, he has been working at in the chemical industry, Esso, and also at DSM. Alfons, welcome.
Thank you, Martijn. Great to be here.
All right. Okay, some practical things. So this webinar will be recorded. The PDF will be made available afterwards within 48 hours. So the audience is on mute. So you can ask questions. So there are two ways to converse with us. So you have your chat functionality on the right hand side that should be open right now, and just underneath you see two text bubbles. And please use this Q&A functionality to ask questions to Alfons and myself and Jeroen. So I will track down the Q&A functionality on the right hand side if you have questions, and if these questions are in line of the conversation I will be having with Alfons and Jeroen, I will ask these questions immediately. If not, I will reserve these questions for the Q&A at the end. So there's also opportunity over there. So feel free to ask questions. So we'll make it very interactive. And like I said, so there is a Q&A at the end, but there is also afterwards an air meeting, an after talk. So after the 60 minutes live webinar, there's an opportunity to have a conversation directly with us. So we'll be joining you in a virtual lounge. We will sitting at table 1. Quite easy to get there, and a kind of Zoom meeting will be opening up. So you can also have some more questions and a conversation right after this in the next 30 minutes. For now, I will put off the camera and also my experts, so you can enlarge your screen, and so you have a better view on the slides. All right. Okay, first as an introduction of Involvation. So like I said, I'm the architect of the SCM Consultancy Subway Map. This is a 2024 version. So basically, we created a visual overview of all the major supply chain consultancy firms in Europe with their service lines, etc. That's what you see right here. And it's, the strategy consultants, the big four, the more IT-related consultants, but also the supply chain boutiques are all in there. And based on their proven technology and projects, you will see that if they have a subway station or not. And as you see here, Involvation is here highlighted, and they are positioned in the learning area. Basically, they are positioned over there because they have developed the Fresh Connection, and you probably already know the Fresh Connection SNP game. So of course they have a subway station on the light blue line that's reflecting S&OP, but there's also they have a subway station on the red line, and that's risk management and resilience. So that's the reason why they have those two subway stations. Alfons, next to the Fresh Connection, you have more simulations development.
Correct. The Fresh Connection is an example, but we developed a lot of games, and actually we have a learning proposition called the Value Chain Academy, where we provide in-company trainings for different type of industries and companies, from chemicals to consumer electronics, fast-moving. So training and doing that with game simulations and with experienced consultants is one of our key topics and competencies. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to talk about two main topics: resilience and S&OP. Why resilience? I've showed this slide already a few times in some webinars. So you see major black swans: COVID-19, war, Ukraine, and also in Gaza. And CBAM is also a bit unknown for a lot of people and companies. Basically, that's cross-border administrative methodology. That's all about carbon accounting and import, that kind of stuff. And as you see, there's all cause and effects happening in the last 4 years. Lockdowns, shortages, but also bullwhips. So the main reason, resilience, a lot of black swans and disruptions ongoing on one hand, and that's leading to shortages and bullwhips both upstream and downstream. And as you have seen in the last 4 years, that supply is volatile, demand is volatile. So that's the reason why S&OP is become more and more strategic. Jeroen, what's your observation when you talk to your customers?
Yeah, like you show here on this slide, you see the big disruptions and the big major black swans, and we all know. But I think what we see in our customers, that the world is becoming more complex. So it's although in the daily operations there are more and more uncertainties, and demand and supply balancing is becoming more and more complex. And I think that's why almost every company nowadays has resilience more or less in their strategy. But the big question in every company is how do you do that? Where do you start? What are the first steps that you can take? And I think that's what we want to address during this webinar.
Yeah, and you have a great practical model developed to explain all this. So if you look at this, this slide, basically S&OP, how did it all start? Like a SNP Poker Game, I would say, with the sales person sweating to pronounce the forecast, probably bluffing how much he would sell, and like it's stated here, cross-functional meeting. And baseline is that a lot of companies still using a lot of Excel. So this slide is already from, I think, 10 years ago. My question to you, Jeroen, what has changed?
Yeah, I think there are quite some developments in the last 10 years, but you still see a lot of differences in maturity between some front runners on S&OP who did quite a lot of work on S&OP and IBP. And you see still a lot of companies are struggling with these elements you see here, the sweating persons. So I think there are big differences within companies, but I think a lot of things also happened in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and another thing is my observation, and I've written a blog about it, I think already 5-6 years ago. S&OP is like a relay game. You have 4 times 100 meters, and you have your stick with your hand over. But in a relay race, 4 times 100 meters, at the end you have a finish line. But with S&OP, the month starts anew, so it goes on and on and on. And basically, there's little fatigue, I would say, within a lot of companies. How do you improve your S&OP cycle? Is it also something what you're seeing? And Alfons, do you also recognize that how do you keep people motivated to do their process on and on?
Yeah, I like the example you're giving, Martijn. It looks like a relay, running a marathon like a relay, and then of course that doesn't work. And I think very often what you see, and it happens, is that it doesn't really progress because it's not focused on decisions, and it's too much data pushing and paper pushing. So it's a lot of work with no output, no impact. And I think that's the key of the S&OP processes, which are running well, where it focuses really on decision making, and also at the same time make it more efficient using all the tools that are available. And then it becomes a relay where you can set world records.
Yeah, maybe to Jeroen, maybe you can explain the normal steps within S&OP.
Yeah, sure. And here you see a typical S&OP or IBP process, as you all know that a typical S&OP process where you're looking forward 3 to 8 months ahead. You're doing the demand and supply balancing aligned with your business goals and your objectives. And yes, clear preparation steps, starting from the product management review, where you talk about the product portfolio, then go to the demand review, with the forecasting, the supply review with the focus on capacity planning. Then you have the reconciliation, and it all ends with decision making in the management business review and the alignment with the different functions like sales, operations, marketing, finance, purchasing, etc. And the good thing, as we discussed, that I think a lot of developments went on in the last years. And the good thing is that we developed from static business planning to more rolling, consensus-based business planning on a monthly cycle. I think that's the good thing. And of course, this standard steps you have to tailor to the context of an organization. But what we see now, and that's maybe the link also to resilience, what we see now that traditional S&OP is focused on business as usual events like promotions, operations costs, factory maintenance, etc. And more you have to include also risk management and resilience topics into your S&OP process and grow to a more resilient S&OP. And that's the topic we're going to talk about today.
A quick question to you, Alfons. Especially before COVID, there was a lot of discussions about the single point of truth, that kind of stuff, and within a company, people are discussing the numbers and are they the right numbers? Has that been changed, or has it been improved?
Yes and no. In some companies, I think it's still too much focusing on a 1 point forecast and one number. Later, we will talk about shifting it to a more scenario mindset, and I think that's the way to go. And you see already companies taking great steps there. And one great Dutch beer brewer is using a statement, a one number mindset, to reflect that, hey, you think in scenarios, so you have kind of a bandwidth in everything you do, but then you choose one number to focus on, and I think that's the way forward, and that also fits exactly with the resilience mindset, which we will explain.
Yeah. Next, now this is a well-known visual based on Gardner, but maybe you can go through it and you see the difference of S&OE, S&OP, and IBP. Jeroen, maybe you can explain it, what it reflects.
Yeah, because S&OP means different things to different people, and this model of Gardner, this maturity model, helps to explain, and it has basically 5 steps. Stage 1, you have no shared goals, no process in place. You very react on everything. If you go to stage 2, then you have a sort of a demand and supply planning process, but it's focused on the short term. So you could say that's more the S&OE, sales and operations execution process. If you go to stage 3, you expand your horizon to, for example, 3 to 18 months. But still it's focused on volume, demand and supply balancing. Then we call it S&OP. If you include the financial part and you go to use more scenario planning, then you go to stage 4, integrated business planning, and stage 5, you expand it to your whole value chain with your suppliers and your customers, and that's what we call orchestrate. And what you see in a lot of companies after the COVID period, they were really forced to play the S&OE role, focus on the short term, emotion driven. And we think that yes, you need a very solid, good S&OE process for the short term, but you also have to have a good sales and operations planning process on stage 3 or 4, or probably stage 5, depending on your goals and your objectives and your strategy. But now what's new, I think, is that you have to integrate the resilience elements in your S&OP to manage the new normal, like we saw in your earlier sheet, Martijn.
Yeah, and another thing, I had a webinar last year about S&OE, specifically. There's a boundary between S&OP and S&OE. That's the frozen horizon. Within this frozen horizon, you do your scheduling and you execute. So beyond that, that's more liquid, and then you are in the S&OP, maybe up to 18 months or beyond that. And S&OE is within the frozen horizon. You know what to create, what to produce, what to buy, etc. So that's one distinction I know based on what we've done in the previous webinar. Another thing, S&OP is more volume-based supply balance matching, whereas IBP is translated into dollars and euros. So you have a more financial view. That's the step between S&OP and IBP.
Exactly.
And orchestrate. The question would be, that's the profitability of all your main players in your whole chain. My prediction is there won't be a lot of value chains that will reach that level, and maybe you cannot optimize the profit of your strategic supplier or strategic partner. So it is not to say that every company should reach stage 5.
No, that's right, Martijn. And I think 80% of the companies are staying in stage 3. And some companies go to stage 4, and probably channel masters like ASML or all of that kind of companies can really orchestrate the whole value chain. But there are not many companies who reach stage 5. I agree with you. Yeah.
So okay, now we get to your new model. I would say for me it's quite new. It's about resilience. So maybe we can go through this model, and then we have a whole discussion about each individual aspect of this model. So first explain the overall model, and then we go into detail of the 5 parts of it.
Yes, I will do that. And this is our framework with the 5 resilience capabilities. We developed this model in a consortium with our partners in Next Gen Resilience Project, together with the Groningen University and Windesheim University for Applied Sciences. And we developed 5 capabilities that are relevant for resilience. And I'm going to explain briefly the 5 elements, capabilities, and then we're going to show you some examples of it. Mm-hmm. The first one is redundancy. And redundancy is all about buffers, and not only buffers on inventory, but also spare capacity, dual sourcing, and the financial buffers you can use to become more resilient. So that's the first capability. The second one is collaboration. And with collaboration, we mean joint decision making and working together with your partners, suppliers, customers, partners, internally and externally. So it's all about joint business planning. It's about joint risk management, typical process like sales and operations planning and IBP developments. But also it's all about culture, a cultural of collaboration and working together. So that's the second capability. The third capability is it's about flexibility, and with flexibility we mean the options you have as a company to adapt to disruptions or to volatility or uncertainty. So you need to have different options, like in logistics, for example, transportation systems, modularities, but also contractual agreements with your suppliers, for example. Can you make some changes in your volumes when needed? And also in product design, modular design, postponement. So flexibility is all about having different options and not stick to one option. The fourth one is visibility. Visibility is that you have access to the right information, and so you can act on it. So here, this is all about forecasting, sharing plans within your chain, but also early warning systems when there are disruptions or developments or changing in the situation. It's about supply chain mapping of your suppliers, your customers, your suppliers, the suppliers of your suppliers, and where are your bottlenecks, where are your risks. So that's all about visibility. And the last part, it's about agility. And people ask sometimes what's the difference between flexibility and agility. Flexibility is having different options, and agility is how fast you can react to changes. For example, short lead times are here important. Are you able to make fast decisions? Can you make? Do you have a fast decision-making process? Can you more frequently run production runs, etc., etc.? So it's all about speed, you could say.
I have a question, maybe to Alfons. I see the phrase "recover" in here, and I know David Simson-Levy, professor of MIT, has created a model around it: time to recover, time to survive, etc. I see different kind of phrases in the middle in the organizational context. So, can you explain what's in the middle? What are these aspects in the middle concerning resilience?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Martijn. So we have the 5 capabilities, and in the middle, what you see is basically a learning cycle. And also, when you think about disruptions, you need to prepare, you need to respond, you need to recover, and you need to learn and grow. So it's also kind of a PDCA cycle. So basically, what we try to show here is that resilience it's not a one-time thing. It's really a mindset. And it's using these capabilities during all the different steps.
And you also wrote an article in the past. It's like the human body, and when you get a heart attack, you will respond. You have to respond. But how do you prevent forgetting to get a heart attack?
No, that's right. We've been writing articles and saying that resilience it's a mindset, and it should become a lifestyle. And indeed, the metaphor of when you had a heart attack and you're on the intensive care unit, you're rethinking, I should have listened to my spouse, to my doctor about eating, drinking, etc., etc. And when you don't take action when you get home and you fall back to your old habits, first of all, changing your lifestyle doesn't give you guarantee that it won't happen again. But in any case, you will have a bigger chance of surviving when it happens, and your recovery will be faster. And I think that's also what the metaphor we want to use with resilience. You need to ingrain resilience in your way of thinking, in your lifestyle, also as a business. And that's why we're pleading today on linking it and integrating it in your S&OP process.
Yeah. And basically, S&OP is also a cycle with the different steps. So the prepare, respond, recover, and learn cycle. Maybe you also could project on your monthly cycle in S&OP, and also to how to learn from your previous relay of 4 times 100 meters.
Correct. Yeah. And there's maybe one best practice which I've seen over the last years from one of our customers, where, for example, in their S&OP cycle, they've got a separate meeting, which they call post-mortem meeting. Maybe a bit of a wrong name for the metaphor we were using, but in any case, what they do in that meeting, they just observe and discuss what happened in the process. That's it. Just to learn and have a better cycle the next time.
Yeah, good point. All right, Jeroen, maybe we go to the next slides in deep to the 5 aspects. So first, redundancy. Maybe you can explain how to recognize and how to use it.
Yeah, because as I said, redundancy, it's all about buffers in your chain, and use buffers as a decision in your sales and operations planning process. And some companies call S&OP SIOP, and I think that's not completely right, because inventory is one element of buffering, but there are more buffers, like capacity, like time, but also financial buffers. And maybe Alfons, you can elaborate a bit more on inventory as a buffer in redundancy.
Yeah, thank you, Jeroen, and I fully agree. SIOP is not the right thing, because then you will see probably inventory as a consequence instead of as one of the potential buffers you need to take into account. The picture you see here, inventory is king instead of cash is king. We used in 2020 because in 2009 there was the crisis, which was a financial crisis, and then it was all about cash. And in 2020, what we did, we built a model. I will come back on modeling later, but we built a model of what was happening in the automotive chain with the bullwhip effect in the chain.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the observations we had, and actually we predicted already in June 2020, was that there's a bullwhip.
Yep.
And there's the upswing of the bullwhip is coming in October, November of that year, when it also really happened. As one of our observations was that that's what you need to take into account in your S&OP process. And then it makes a lot of sense, if you know that the upswing of that bullwhip is coming, that you build inventory to be able, because it was going to be much higher than, for example, your actual inventory or prediction or whatever. Mm-hmm. So to use inventory as one of the tools to be able to do demand and supply balancing, not only short term but also midterm.
Yeah. The flip side of the story is, in early 2022, there were some articles, especially in the US, with the header of we go from just in time to just in case, and mm-hmm. that was green lighting to all the buyers to buy any inventory, any spare parts, whatever what they could find. And based on that, a lot of companies are still stuck with overloaded warehouses, probably with the wrong inventory. So basically, the shift from just in time to just in case, has led to other problems and bullwhips.
Yeah, but this is a great example of where a catchy phrase like you mentioned is getting the wrong responses, because mm-hmm. if you building the wrong inventory is never good, then inventory is not king. And I think you're right. What happened in a lot of companies that just in case, so let's build inventory, but maybe they were already too late, or they built the wrong inventory. And then of course what happened due to the shortages which we saw in 2021, 2022. Just because of fear, they probably built too much inventory. And guess what? Then inflation, energy prices, and then the inventory you had also became much more expensive. And then again, you go to the financial perspective. No, look at inventory as one of your biggest tools and one of the buffers you need to deal with.
Yeah, and capacity, the best example of company who got it right was Agco. They manufacture tractors. They are competing with automotive, and in January 2020 they saw things happening in China. So they reserved all the capacity with their suppliers and not buying spare parts. He also did it, but they bought capacity, and because of that they could produce all through COVID, whereas the automotive had a lot of shutdowns. So that's how you manage capacity in the right way.
Yeah, maybe Martijn, another example is in one of our clients is a food producer, and they use the KPI of utilization of their production lines as a KPI for resilience. And what they mean with it, if they are above 80% utilization, then they get the orange flag, and if you are above 85%, you get a red flag. And why? Because that has an impact on your SLAs and your lead times, but also about your capabilities to respond to fluctuation. So in your S&OP, you decide then, hey, do we want to use that extra capacity, but then we are less flexible? Yeah, that's a typical decision about capacity as a buffer.
Yeah. Good example, from my my university days, above 80% you get longer lead times, and your machine is getting overheated, and some orders won't get out of the system. So that's a good point, and it's good that with asset utilization, every investor say, I would like to have 100% asset utilization or even more with extra shifts, but in the end, you will get all kind of bottlenecks, disruptions in supply chain. We all know that. Good point.
Yeah, and the same counts for capacity that you can outsource? Do you have options to outsource, and do you have access to that? You can also decide in your S&OP on your options to outsource and to keep that as an option for you. Yeah.
Good point. Yeah. All right. Next aspect is collaboration.
Yeah, collaboration. Yeah, of course, collaboration is S&OP is the heart of decision making. So also in collaboration, and one of the examples here of joint business planning is from an example of an IBP process we set up for a producer of chocolate. And the main goal here was to align the different stakeholders, the internal stakeholders like product management, the sales, operations and purchasing, to make better decisions based on assumptions. And we did that before the COVID crisis. And during the COVID crisis, they experienced that they were much more flexible because they could make better decisions, aligned decisions with the different internal stakeholders. And I think that's one of the key learnings also here. It's all about collaboration, and start with your internal stakeholders before you start with your external stakeholders. But you have to start with your internal stakeholders.
Talking about chocolate, I know I just read last week there's a huge shortage in chocolate because the harvest of chocolate beans didn't go that well. So now companies in the chocolate industry can have a discussion about how to get enough chocolate for your factory.
Yes, and also that's from a supplier point of view, but also from a business point of view. Where do you want to focus? If you have limited capacity, for example, where is your focus on what products and what customers and what markets? And that's also a part of joint business planning and make the right decisions there. And if you be more mature in your internal decision making, you can also grow to incorporate your collaboration and your decision making with external partners like suppliers or customers. And a nice example is, I think, vendor managed inventory. And here, this is an example of the agricultural business where a supplier of fertilizers has access to more than 1,500 tanks, or you could say stock points of growers. And that gives a lot of flexibility in your planning options. And that makes you also more responsive to fluctuations because you have much more options in your distribution and in your refilling of the tanks. So that's also an important element in collaboration, I think. And here you need trust, of course.
Maybe an example from chemical industry, from my former jobs, and also from some customers, where we had VMI relationships with some important customers, and we would use the VMI stocks in our S&OP process because it was a more flexible. Basically, it was an extended inventory, and we could decide in certain months to fill up the tanks or to go a bit deeper in the inventory levels for the VMI tanks, depending on our internal demand and supply balance. And that worked really, really extremely well. And it gave much more flexibility in managing your total chain. But it was part of the S&OP process to look at the VMI flexibilities we had.
So question to you, Alfons, already 20 years ago, we were talking about CPFR, especially in the CPG industry. So collaborative predictive and forecasting and replenishment, I think it was. So, but what happened to CPFR? Because it's here, ecosystem collaboration. What happened, and will it return?
Very interesting. CPFR, I think, because it started in CPG and in those chains, very often there wasn't that much trust. So I think, for example, VMI is the next step where it's also physical, because with VMI you sometimes don't even need detailed forecasting. But it starts with trust. If there's trust in the chain, you can do this, and that's where we also see examples. Will there also be chains where it will be more difficult? Yeah, when there's a different power balance in the chain, it will be more difficult. And the interesting thing is, as you mentioned, CPG. The example which you see here also on ecosystem collaboration, it's from one of our customers, which is a big global FMCG company, where a couple of years ago, as part of a training, we worked on a project where we had different partners in the chain, in the ecosystem, so suppliers, but also the distributors, and we developed and implemented a joint S&OP process, and then together they could decide that, hey, we really need to expedite, for example, raw materials to the distributor faster because of things that are going to happen, etc., etc. But it starts with trust. But there you saw that, yeah, collaboration across the chain, ecosystem, that's the way to go. And interestingly, I'm participating at a Logicam at the moment, where sustainability is also a big topic, especially in chemical industry. If you think about scope 3, what needs to be there again, it's thinking about the ecosystem and collaboration.
Yeah. Another thing, we have also published an article about it. Saint-Gobain is a manufacturer of glass and windows. So they are using a software application where they are planning for themselves, for the sister company, but also for the tier 1. And basically they give a recommendation of replenishment for all these 3 parties involved in the supply chain. So basically they open up for this value chain the stock points, and they give recommendations to all 3 parties involved, also to your first tier supplier. So basically that will change if you get access to this kind of environments where you can see your actual plan. So this tier 1 supplier could see in the construction sites and project, etc., what's going on, how many windows or parts for windows he could expect as demand. So these things, also with the technology involved happening now, we'll see improve over time.
Yeah, and this is also what we saw, by the way, then the negative example in the automotive sector in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And coming back also to your remark on just-in-time, where the big automotive companies, they have just-in-time supplies from their tier 1, but there's hardly or no communication to tier 2, 3, 4, etc. And so that's where it broke down. For example, with regard to semiconductors, and now you see also there, it's just needed that what's your ecosystem and how can you collaborate in your ecosystem.
I got a question or remark from the audience in the chat function. Please use the Q&A. That's the one below to make it easy for me to track. So collaboration certainly required when you have a high value, highly critical SKUs with buyers. You need to provide the comfort level to the suppliers to develop a good relationship. Is it only applicable to a high value supply chain, or also in a low cost environment?
I think also in low cost. I think again, if you think about your raw materials, your suppliers, and we'll come back to that also when we talk about visibility, you also need to know how not only the value, but also how critical is it, or how risky to get the product, how important are you for your suppliers. So depending on that analysis, you decide also where do I need that to build that relationship.
Yeah.
And it could be that for example, you saw manufacturers of soft drinks, for example, running out of aluminium because they thought they were a big customer, but there were other industries which were more important.
Yep.
So that's what you need to do. Think about your place in that ecosystem, and depending on that, develop your relationships.
Yeah. I won't go into the OTIF discussion here, but OTIF means different things for different companies in the chain, and all kind of companies have different kind of definition of OTIF, on time in full. But basically, you have to realize what it is for you, what it is for your customer downstream, or for your suppliers upstream. Who can change this? Is OTIF on time? What does it mean and in full? So that's a whole different discussion. But I see a lot of companies struggling also how to use OTIF in this kind of environments. But
maybe Martijn, one more thing to add on that. Collaboration can be on very flexible and integration, but also on efficiency. Yeah? I worked for DHL, and we did some big collaborations with our customers, but it was all about on operational excellence, on efficiency. So that's also a way of collaboration. Eh?
Yeah, good point. All right, so getting to the next aspect of resilience.
Yeah, flexibility. Flexibility means having different options, and a key element in having different options is also your product design. How complex is your product? And here you see some examples of in the automotive, where you have modular design, where you have different brands on one single platform. And I think that's an important topic in resilience, and also in IBP S&OP, because it all starts with the product management review, where the product portfolio is an important topic. And here you can address topics of modular design, on complexity reduction, which is a key element in resilience, as I said. So I think S&OP is the right tool or method also to address these kind of topics, complexity reduction and modular design. And we know all the example of the Van Moof bikes, where they had a very they had not modular design, they had a very custom-made design and products, and they weren't flexible enough to work together with other bike manufacturers. So that's an example of how you can build a product that is too complex.
And one thing, I see flexibility, but when I talk to companies, and I talked with a lot of supply chain directors at manufacturing and wholesale and retail companies, but portfolio management is quite often not an aspect what they are doing frequently. So I will ask a supply chain director, how many times a year do you do a portfolio optimization and rationalization? And sometimes I get the answer, we've done it last year, and I should argue you should do that every month. So SKU rationalization and optimization is often a neglected aspect. Maybe they think more SKUs means more flexibility, but I think that's not the case.
No,
Correct.
I think the more modular design and the more standardization you have, the more flexible you are. It's the other way around often. So, and I see it especially in machine building companies. It's a very important topic. Also in S&OP, in category management, in supply chain management, to reduce the complexity of the components and the suppliers. Otherwise, it's becoming too difficult to manage.
And Alfons, you mentioned earlier in S&OP cycle, instead of one number, you talk about scenario planning. Here is also reflected. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, I'll elaborate on scenario planning, but first maybe on the spot trading. What we try to show here is that where can you build flexibility and how to use flexibility in your S&OP cycle. And Jeroen mentioned in the product management review, the spot trading example is flexibility also. What's the flexibility you have in your sales? And here we have some examples from the sugar industry, but I also know it from oil industry or chemical industry. You have contracts, you have agreements on bandwidth of contracts, but if there's still a demand-supply unbalance, then you can, for example, use spot trading to have the balance, which means that you can sell additional products or buy additional products. And actually, I've been a spot trader in the past in oil industry. And certainly, certain weeks I needed to buy the same material, which I had to sell again 2 weeks later, just for demand supply balancing. Yeah. But that's how you can build flexibility in sales. And scenario planning, actually, what the biggest point is here, that when you think about flexibility and options, you think in scenarios. And scenario planning, we've plotted it here at flexibility, but we'll come back later when we are talking about the conclusions. I think moving to a scenario mindset is probably one of the most important things in becoming more resilient and building resilience in your S&OP process. Continuously talking, discussing, and addressing the assumptions behind scenarios, that's probably the way to go. And of course, then also tooling, which can help you. But don't wait for tooling. You can already do it now.
Yeah. All right. Next point is visibility, also a hot topic. So let's dig into that.
Yeah, the first one we want to mention here is supply chain mapping, and that's all about know who your suppliers and your customers are, know where your suppliers get their products, who are the suppliers of the suppliers, the components, and also where are your risks, your bottlenecks. And if you know that, you can use that as a driver for your decision making in your S&OP. And I think you have to make a distinction between the more short-term operational mapping. That's okay. A disruption is happening somewhere in the world, in a harbor or something. And what do I have to do right now? That's one element. And a lot of software is focusing on that, software suppliers. And on the other hand, it's the more tactical midterm supply chain mapping. That's just know who your suppliers are and who the tier 2 and 3 suppliers are. So I think it's an important element in visibility. Know your supply chain and know your bottlenecks.
Yeah. You know, we have also developed a self-assessment on visibility end-to-end, you know, addressing upstream, internal and downstream, operational, tactical and strategical level. So it's good to address and to highlight at which level do you want visibility? Is it operational, real-time transport visibility, that kind of stuff? Or is it on the tactical level, capacities on your suppliers, or strategic? Another thing I would like to address, you know, a lot of companies were looking at dual sourcing, especially the last 2 years when there was shortages and they want to have other suppliers. But an interesting survey and research in India has found out, you know, when you are considering dual sourcing, your previously selective strategic supplier will think, okay, when you apply dual sourcing, you won't get the stuff from me when there are shortages. So in the end, they found out dual sourcing is not always the best option. Maybe you should stick to single sourcing, but have a more open conversation with your strategic supplier, so he will remain strategic. So dual sourcing is not always the best option.
No, and I fully agree. And and again, that's what looking at the capabilities, what you will see is that some of the capabilities are linked. And dual sourcing, yeah, maybe first it starts with visibility. Where are my suppliers, raw material suppliers, etc.? Where is it critical? And then instead of going for dual source, it could be that you collaborate more with your current supplier and, for example, make sure that you have the materials closer to your factory instead of at a supplier.
Yeah.
So there are different options. And I think, again, linking back to thinking in scenarios, that's the whole mindset. But it starts with visibility. And yeah, dual sourcing is not by definition the only solution and therefore not the best solution. It's
And also,
one of the solutions.
yeah, what I also saw in the last few years, it's, you know, it's not always placing orders, but also having contracts and commitments. So if you have shown commitments, I will buy in the next 1, 2, 3 years an X amount of spare parts, raw materials, or whatever. That's also something like like collaboration on one hand, but also giving visibility to your suppliers on your strategic commitments you are doing. So that's also what's happening with ASML, with their whole network, within 300 miles around them. So that's the magic, I would say, from ASML. That's one point also you should address.
Yeah, part of the visibility is also, and I think this is a good point. We saw a lot of industries and companies who, when they had a situation with allocation a couple of years ago, that created a lot of what we call zombie orders. Because if you're ordering and you think maybe we won't get it, let's place 4 more orders also at different suppliers, and then when there's a more normal demand supply balance, suddenly all these orders are gone. So visibility is also about what's the order profile of what's in order. Yeah.
And you have seen it in Western Europe with the solar panels. So last year, a lot of building companies, they placed orders at the different at several suppliers, and then in hoping that one of them would be able to supply their solar panels, and now you see the demand has been dropping in the last half year in Western Europe, and now all the wholesalers are stuck with too much inventory on solar panels.
Yep.
Early warning systems you mentioned here. So you see also some tools providing early warning system. There's a flooding happening in Vietnam, and that could be a tier 3 of your supply chain. This kind of stuff. Are there more examples in that area?
Yeah, this is one example, and there you have to be careful not to jump on all the different signals. But for example, of course, we see what's happening with the Red Sea at the moment. But for example, there were also issues with the Panama Canal last year, but there it was known 4 months before what was going to happen. And for example, an example I heard yesterday was that there were strikes in the West Coast, U.S. harbors last year because of salary negotiations. At the end of this year, there will be salary negotiations on the East Coast. So that could be an early warning. And use information, data to translate it into, is this really an early warning? But incorporate that in your S&OP process, and taking that into account makes a lot of sense, and do it.
Yeah, we can talk about digital twins, but considering the time, I would suggest to move on to the next slide. So, Jeroen, what's happening over here?
Yeah, the last capability you want to discuss is agility, speed, fast decision making in S&OP, for example. And a couple of things we want to mention here is what we call AI BP. So how do you use AI and other technologies in your decision making? And more generally speaking, you can use the toolings to speed up the different planning scenarios and use the different data to make better decisions. And an example is in one of our customers uses AI tooling to scrape all the promotions of competitors in the world and use that in your own planning and capacity planning models. So you can use that information, and it's now doable because you have the technology that can help you with that. So that's an example of where you can speed up your decision making. And also,
So Alfons, in the bottom you see a monthly cycle. So you have a monthly cycle, but if something's happening within the month and it's of strategic importance, also from the longer term, how should you respond to that, and how should you inject that into your cycle?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the monthly cycle, it doesn't prevent that if your production line burns down next week, you're not going to wait till next month to discuss it.
No.
A plan is a plan. A plan is there to act on what's happening. And but the example we're giving here is this was an actual situation in my former job where we ran into an issue that the raw material of our refineries for chemical production, there was a huge shortage. And so we normally had a 3 weeks inventory, and it went down to a couple of days. And what we did, we had a monthly cycle, and we decided to run our S&OP cycle not every month, but 2 times per week with our CEO present, because we would make decisions on would we buy cargoes of raw material, yes, no, at what price, etc., during the S&OP meetings. So it became kind of a crisis S&OP meeting. But because we had that decision-making process, it worked. And actually, we did this for a couple of months. And we were the only company doing this in our field. So we gained market share a lot. And then we went back to the normal monthly cycle. And that's sometimes it needs faster decision making. So if you already have a good process, then you can use that also to speed up the decision making if needed. And the last example we have here is governance. That's from one of our customers where in the beginning of COVID, for example, they had to air freight stuff from the US. But the issue was that because of all the flights which were cancelled, there was also not enough capacity for air freight. So if there was a slot available, you needed to book it immediately. So they decided to give the authority to book an air freight to the planner instead of the 3 levels higher. And they were able then to book air freight and also outsmart competition by doing that. Of course, you don't want to air freight for a lot of reasons, but for a certain period of time, which they decided in the S&P meeting, they changed the governance and they set it back again when it was not needed anymore. But it really sped up their decision making, which they needed at that point of time.
All right. So finally, we get to the final points of this webinar and this visual, I would say. So maybe we can go through this these building blocks or red flags. So maybe Jeroen, you can say what are the building blocks and the red flags.
I will do it briefly because of the time. But if you talk about redundancy, for example, there are some red flags sometimes. For example, short shelf life of your products. You maxed out already your capacity, or there are some financial restrictions. In collaboration, there might be a power balance in the chain as a reason that collaboration is difficult, or there is a focus on the short horizon, for example. In flexibility, unique manufacturing or formulations can be a red flag, or limited sourcing options, or brand portfolio limitations that sometimes decreases the options for flexibility. Visibility, we talked already about trust. If there is no trust, there is no data sharing, or sometimes you have very complex supply chains. And in agility, I think cultural aspects are very crucial. Bureaucracy can sometimes be a red flag, and the management style sometimes that's also can be a red flag. So the point here is, sometimes you want to use some of these capabilities, but there are, in your context, in your organization, can be some red flags why you can or cannot use one of the capabilities. I think that's the point here.
Yeah, and maybe to sum it all up, you're here in this overview integrating the steps in S&OP, and you integrate it with the 5 elements of resilience.
Yeah, so the point is here, okay, you have an S&OP or an IBP process with different steps. Use the capabilities in your context, elements of the capabilities in every step of your S&OP process. And it all comes together in the management business review or the S&OP meeting. And make use of the capabilities, use assumption package, use scenarios where you incorporate the different capabilities of resilience. I think that's the main message here. Introduce the new dimension of resilience in your S&OP process.
And depending on your environment, on your maturity, on your industry, you can take elements of this resilience module of 5 and integrate it in your monthly cycle or in each step. Which elements we should reconsider or should focus on during the decision-making process. So what are our options considering what we know from resilience?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Good point. How should you apply all this?
Yeah, because that's the 100 billion question, of course. And I think there are a couple of steps. First of all, integrate S&OP and resilience. I think that's a no-brainer. You have to do this to manage the uncertainty and the volatility in your chain. The second point is create also a resilient mindset. As Alfons already said, that's a lifestyle. Adapt and use scenario planning in your decision-making. And last point is also use tools, technologies to speed up your analysis and your preparations so you can make better decisions. And AI, for example, machine learning, but also planning tooling and BI tools, etc. All can be very useful to speed up your analysis for the preparations for your decisions.
Yeah. And I think this visual is also reflecting the different steps, one step at a time. I think don't overeat too much.
Mm-hmm.
So and in the end, S&OP is still a useful process. That's the final step. It's not some magic over there.
Exactly. Step by step, as it says here, integrate S&OP resilience, create a mindset, use technologies, and then boost up your S&OP and use the plan, do, check, act cycle, one step at a time. Yeah.
So we were almost out of time. So to wrap it all up, so I have some questions already done and addressed. So like I said, so we're running out of time. So there will be an extra 30 minutes right after this. So if you have more questions, if you have some burning questions, please feel free to join us in a virtual lounge right after this. So we will be there the next 30 minutes, and you can have a direct conversation with the three of us. So that's for now. There is a resilience scan. So here's the link. We will make sure that is available. You can do this scan yourself, and then you get an overview how you're scoring on the 5 elements. And next to this, there's also a consulting subway map available. On the left-hand side, there's a link. And we, together with Involvation, we created an S&P subway map, explain the different steps like we have mentioned before in one overview and make it more digestible. So I would say, download it. We'll make sure that it will become available. And with this, I would like to thank the audience for listening in and for the questions. And I would like to thank Jeroen and Alfons for joining me and explaining how to integrate S&OP in resilience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martijn.
And like I said, maybe I will see you in another webinar, one of the coming Wednesdays. If not, maybe I will see you later in the lounge, or I see you somewhere else in a live face-to-face event. Involvation will do some live events. We will do some live events, and we'll do some webinars. So thanks for now, and bye-bye.